The emergency lights on Station Helios 9 flickered red against the darkness. Pressed his back against the cold metal wall, his breathing slow and controlled. Blood had dried on his tactical suit from wounds 3 days old. He listened to the heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor below. They had returned. He counted 5 distinct walking patterns. Their clawed feet clicked against the steel floor in that familiar rhythm. Through the gap in the ventilation grate, watched the alien raiders spread out across the cargo bay. They were tall creatures, nearly 8 feet when standing straight. Their scaled skin looked like armor, dark green with patterns that shifted slightly in the light. Each one carried weapons that hummed with energy. Captain Rax led them, recognized the leader by the scars across his face and the way the others moved around him with respect. Rax's voice was deep and rough when he spoke in their clicking language. Understood every word. He had spent months studying them before his mission went wrong. "The human corpses are where we left them," Rax said, kicking at a piece of debris. "Weak things, they died so easily." His jaw tightened. He thought of his team. Captain had died first, shot in the back during the ambush. Young had tried to fight back but was torn apart by claws. The others had fallen one by one. Had only survived because he fell through a broken floor panel during the chaos. The thought he died in the explosion that followed. "The quantum fuel is still here," another raider said. "This one was smaller, probably a scout. The humans didn't have time to destroy it." "Of course they didn't," Rax laughed. It was an ugly sound like rocks grinding together. "Humans are prey animals. They run when real predators arrive. Their soft skin tears so easily. Their bones break with barely any pressure. How such a weak species ever reached the stars, I will never understand." The other made sounds of agreement. They began moving toward the fuel storage area, their weapons ready but relaxed. They felt safe here. They thought the station belonged to them now. Watched them go. His eyes were cold and calculating. He had been hiding in these walls for 3 months, 3 months of pain, hunger, and planning. They had killed his team, stolen their supplies, and left them to rot like garbage. They thought humans were weak. They thought one human alone was no threat at all. They were wrong. The station's computer system hummed quietly next to him. Had spent weeks gaining access to every part of it. He knew which cameras still worked and which were broken. He knew every corridor, every room, every hiding place. He had studied this behavior during their first raid. He knew how they thought and how they moved. Most importantly, he knew they were arrogant. Through his makeshift monitor, watched the raiders split up. 2 went to the fuel storage. 2 began checking the living quarters for anything valuable. Rax stayed in the cargo bay, probably to guard their exit. The scout wandered toward the science labs. Smiled without humor. The scout was making a mistake. He was alone, away from his pack, in an area filled with equipment he didn't understand. They relied on their pack tactics. They were stronger together, but alone they made mistakes. Moved through the ventilation shaft with practiced silence. His body ached from old injuries, but he ignored the pain. Pain was just information. It told him he was still alive, still capable of fighting. He had survived worse during his training with Earth's Ghost Protocol program. The Ghost Protocol had taught him many things: how to survive in hostile territory, how to turn any environment into a weapon, how to think like prey while acting like a predator. Most humans fought with strength and technology. Ghost Protocol operatives fought with patience and intelligence. He reached a junction in the ventilation system and paused. Below, he could hear the scout moving through the science lab. The alien was looking at the human equipment with curiosity, touching things without understanding their purpose. Watched through a grate as the scout picked up a data tablet and tried to activate it. The tablet's screen glowed. Had left it there on purpose, loaded with false information about human supply routes. If they found it, they would think it was valuable intelligence. They would waste time studying it while worked. But that wasn't his move yet, not today. Today was about sending a message. moved past the science lab and made his way to the station's environmental control room. The door was sealed, but he had the override codes. Inside, the room was dark except for the glow of control panels. He sat down and began typing commands. The station systems responded to his touch. Temperature controls, atmospheric processors, lighting grids, water recycling. All of it was connected, all of it could be controlled from this room. The raiders had never bothered to secure it because they didn't think anyone was left alive who could use it. Programmed a series of subtle changes. The temperature in the cargo bay would drop 2 degrees every hour. The lights in certain corridors would flicker at random intervals. Strange sounds would echo through the ventilation system. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would make them leave. Just enough to make them uncomfortable, just enough to make them wonder. He finished his work and checked the monitors again. They were still looting the station. They laughed and joked with each other, confident in their superiority. Rax was examining a human weapon, turning it over in his clawed hands like it was a child's toy. Primitive, Rax said to no one in particular. They make such primitive things. No wonder they lose every battle. Leaned back in his chair and watched. His hand touched the dog tags hanging around his neck. They belonged to his team, collected from their bodies before they returned. Good people, brave soldiers, dead because someone had betrayed their mission coordinates to the enemy. He would mourn them properly later. Right now, he had work to do. The distress beacon was still broadcasting from the communication tower. It sent out the same message every hour, calling for help that would never come. The nearest Earth coalition ship was 3 weeks away. Could have disabled it, but he left it running. Let them hear it. Let them laugh at the desperate calls for rescue. They wouldn't be laughing soon. Stood and moved back into the ventilation system. His body was lean and hard from months of survival. His eyes had adjusted to the darkness. He had learned every sound the station made, every vibration, every pattern. This place wasn't a tomb anymore. It was his hunting ground. As he crawled through the shaft, he heard Rax's voice echoing from below. "We'll stay for 3 days, take everything valuable. Then we burn this place and move to the next human outpost. Easy prey, easy profit." 3 days. They had given him a timeline. That was good. Liked working with deadlines. It focused the mind and sharpened the instincts. He reached his hidden camp in an abandoned maintenance room. The space was small but secure. He had supplies here: water, food, medical supplies, weapons, everything he had salvaged over the past 3 months. Sat down and began checking his equipment. A plasma cutter, magnetic grips, chemical compounds, electronic scramblers, not military weapons, just tools he had found around the station. But in the right hands, any tool could become a weapon. He opened a data pad and began writing. Notes on each raider, their weapons, their behavior, their weak points, the way they communicated through pheromone signals, the way they relied on their superior strength. The thought humans were weak because they weren't as strong or as fast, but strength and speed meant nothing if you couldn't catch your prey. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters. They didn't need to be faster. They just needed to be smarter, more patient, more adaptable. Was about to teach them a lesson about human evolution. He closed the data pad and looked at the station map on the wall. Red marks showed where they were camping. Blue marks showed his hidden supplies. Green marks showed potential ambush points. The hunt was beginning. The first strange sound came at midnight station time. A low metallic groan that echoed through the cargo bay where they had set up their camp. Rax lifted his head from his sleeping mat, listening. The sound came again, then faded into silence. "Just the old station settling," one of his raiders said nervously. Rax grunted and went back to sleep, but the sounds continued throughout the night. Sometimes a distant clang, like metal hitting metal. Sometimes a hiss of air from the ventilation system. sometimes footsteps that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. By morning, they were tired and irritable. Watched them from his hiding spot, satisfied. He had spent the night moving through the station, creating sounds, adjusting systems. Nothing dangerous, just enough to keep them awake. Tired enemies made mistakes. The scout named volunteered for the morning patrol. He wanted to prove himself brave in front of the others. Knew this because he had been listening to their conversations through the station's communication system. They didn't know the speakers still worked in some areas. They talked freely, never suspecting human ears were listening. Moved through the corridors with his weapon ready. He was young for probably on his first major raid. His scales were bright green, not yet darkened by age and battle scars. He checked each room carefully, looking for threats. He never thought to look up. Waited in the ceiling panels, perfectly still. Passed beneath him, so focused on what was ahead that he forgot to watch all directions. It was a common mistake. Most predators only looked forward because that's where their prey ran. But wasn't prey, not anymore. When entered the medical bay, dropped down behind him. Silent, precise. The started to turn but was already moving. He jabbed a chemical injector into the gap between his armor plates. The sedative worked fast. Managed one surprised sound before his legs gave out. Caught the falling body and lowered it quietly to the floor. He worked quickly. First, he removed all of his weapons, the energy rifle, the plasma pistol, the knife made from some kind of alien bone. He placed them in a neat pile across the room. Next came the communication device, the armor plating, even the breathing filter that wore in low oxygen environments. Stripped every piece of equipment from the unconscious raider. Then he did something that would send a very specific message. He took his plasma cutter and carefully burned handprints into his chest armor. Human handprints, 5 fingers each, unmistakable. When woke up and looked down, he would see the evidence. A human had touched him, had complete control over him, could have killed him but chose not to. Left the raider in the medical bay and disappeared back into the walls. 3 hours later, he heard the shouts as the other found their missing scout. Through a security camera, watched Rax examine the unconscious. The captain's face showed confusion and anger. He looked at the weapons piled neatly across the room, at the burned handprints, at the complete absence of any sign of struggle. How? Rax demanded when finally woke up. How did a human do this? Had no answers. He remembered entering the room and then nothing. No fight, no warning, just darkness. Rax sent 3 more raiders to sweep the station. They went together, weapons ready, watching all directions now. They were learning, but not fast enough. Led them on a careful path. He activated motion sensors in empty corridors. Made them waste time checking rooms that had nothing inside. Used the station's few working holographic projectors to create shadows that moved just at the edge of their vision. They grew more nervous with each empty room. In the engineering section, had prepared a special surprise. He had spent hours the previous night arranging cargo containers in a specific pattern. The containers looked stable, but they weren't. He had loosened the support bolts and adjusted the magnetic locks to a very precise setting. When the 3 raiders entered the room, they saw nothing suspicious. Just old containers stacked against the wall. They started to move past them. Hidden in the control booth, pressed a button. The magnetic locks released. The containers shifted. Thousands of pounds of metal began to fall in a direction had carefully calculated. They had exactly 3 seconds to react. They dove out of the way, their superior reflexes saving their lives. The containers crashed down, blocking the exit they had just used. The sound was deafening. Dust and debris filled the air. When the dust settled, the 3 raiders found themselves trapped in a dead-end room. The only other exit was locked. The containers had fallen in a pattern that looked random but wasn't. Someone had planned this. Someone had predicted exactly where they would be standing. It took them 2 hours to move enough containers to escape. When they finally made it back to the cargo bay, they were exhausted and shaken. No one had died. No one was even seriously hurt. But the message was clear. The human could have killed them. He chose not to. That night, Rax called a meeting. All the raiders gathered in the cargo bay, listened through the communication system. "One human," Rax said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "One human is making us look like fools. This ends tomorrow. We work in pairs. No one goes anywhere alone. We check every room together. We secure each section of the station one at a time." "Maybe we should leave," one raider suggested quietly. "The quantum fuel isn't worth this." Rax turned on him with fury. "Leave? Run from a human? Are you suggesting that one weak, soft human is more dangerous than our entire raiding party?" No one answered, but saw the doubt in their eyes through the camera. They were starting to wonder. Over the next day, they became more organized. They moved in groups. They secured the cargo bay and the fuel storage area. They set up motion detectors and alarm systems. They thought like soldiers instead of looters. Adapted. He couldn't pick them off one by one anymore, so he changed his approach. If they wanted to defend their secured areas, he would make those areas uncomfortable, uninhabitable. He started with the air quality. A few adjustments to the atmospheric processors made the oxygen content in the cargo bay drop slowly, not enough to be dangerous, just enough to cause headaches and fatigue. They didn't notice at first. They just felt tired and cranky. Then he adjusted the water recycling system. The water from the tap started tasting slightly wrong, not poisonous, just unpleasant. They complained but drank it anyway. The temperature in their sleeping area began to fluctuate, sometimes too hot, sometimes too cold, never comfortable. Every day brought new small irritations. Food from their supplies would be moved slightly, making them think they were losing track. Equipment would be in different places than they remembered. Lights would turn on and off at random times. They started arguing with each other. They were tired, uncomfortable, and on edge. They snapped at simple questions and made careless mistakes. Watched it all with cold satisfaction. This was psychological warfare. Death wasn't always the best weapon. Sometimes fear and doubt were more effective. On the 5th day, he left his first message. They woke to find words written on the cargo bay wall, not in human language, in perfect script. The letters were precise and carefully formed. "You are in my territory now." Rax stared at the message for a long time. A human who understood their language. A human who could move through their secured areas without being detected. A human who had been studying them while they thought he was just surviving. "He's been learning," one of the older raiders said quietly, "watching us, understanding us." "He's one human," Rax insisted, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. That afternoon, another raider was found unconscious in the maintenance tunnels. His weapons were gone. His equipment was removed. And written on a piece of paper next to him was another message in script. Lesson 1. Always check your equipment. The raider's weapon had been disabled. The power cell had been removed hours before the encounter. He had been carrying a useless piece of metal, thinking it would protect him. Rax looked at the unconscious raider and the message. Something changed in his expression. It wasn't fear exactly. It was respect. Grudging, unwanted respect. "He's not just surviving," Rax said quietly. "He's hunting us." The other looked at each other. Hunting. The word had power in their culture. Prey ran and hid. Predators hunted. They had been thinking of the human as prey, but prey didn't plan. Prey didn't adapt. Prey didn't leave messages in their enemy's language. In his hidden room, listened to their conversation and allowed himself a small smile. They were starting to understand. They had superior strength, speed, and senses. But none of that mattered in an environment controlled by someone who understood every wall, every system, every weakness. Station Helios 9 wasn't their territory. It was his, and he was going to make sure they never forgot it. He opened his data pad and looked at his notes. Patterns of behavior, weak points in their tactics, individual fears and habits. He had been studying them for days now, learning how they thought, how they reacted to stress. The hunted in packs because they were strong together, but had learned something important about pack hunters. They relied on each other. They needed that connection to feel safe. So he would break that connection, one careful step at a time. Outside his room, the station hummed and creaked. The settled in for another uncomfortable night, and somewhere in the walls, a lone human prepared his next move. The second ship arrived on the 8th day, watched through the external cameras as it docked with the station. It was larger than the first ship, built for combat rather than raiding. The docking procedure was precise and professional. These weren't common looters. The airlock opened and 12 new entered the station. They moved differently than Rax's raiders. Their weapons were military grade. Their armor was pristine. They scanned every corner as they walked, checking for threats with practiced efficiency. At their head walked a female taller than the others. Her scales were dark green, almost black, with white patterns that marked her as high-ranking. She carried herself with absolute confidence. "Commander," Rax greeted her with obvious relief. "Thank you for coming." "My brother calls for help against one human." His voice was sharp. "This had better be worth my time." Through the camera, studied her carefully, Rax's sister. That explained the immediate response to his call for reinforcements, but it also meant something else. She had a personal stake in this now. Family honor was important to culture. Rax showed her the evidence, the disabled raiders, the messages, the systematic harassment that had made his crew jumpy and paranoid. Listened without comment, her face unreadable. "Show me the station layout," she commanded. Watched as they spread a holographic map across a table. His clawed finger traced through the corridors, identifying choke points and strategic positions. She was good, better than Rax. She understood tactics and terrain. "The human is using the maintenance tunnels," she said. "These passages." She highlighted several routes on the map. "Too small for us to enter comfortably. He moves through spaces we can't reach." "We've tried to seal them," Rax said, "but there are too many access points." "Then we don't seal them, we make them traps," smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I brought equipment, bioscanners that can detect human DNA, motion sensors that track body heat. We'll know where he is at all times." Felt a chill run down his spine. Bioscanners. That changed things. He had been relying on this inability to track him through the station's old systems. If they could detect his DNA, his advantages would disappear. He needed to act fast. Split our forces strategically. 4 teams of 3, each covering a section of the station. They set up their bioscanners at key junctions. Within hours, the station was blanketed with detection equipment. Pulled back to his hidden room and thought. He couldn't avoid the scanners forever. His DNA was all over the station from months of living here, but maybe that was the point. Maybe he had left too much evidence of his presence. An idea formed, dangerous, risky, but possible. He gathered samples from around his room, hair, skin cells, blood from his old bandages. He placed them in small containers and began moving through the station using routes he knew the scanners hadn't covered yet. He left the samples in random locations, maintenance rooms, storage areas, corridors far from where he actually lived. The bioscanners lit up with multiple positive readings, human DNA everywhere. The rush to each location, only to find empty rooms. "He's contaminated the entire station," said with frustration. "Smart. The scanners are useless if his DNA is everywhere." But while they were chasing false leads, was busy with something else. He had reached the station's fusion core control room. The core powered everything on the station. Life support, gravity, the docking clamps holding both ships. He began carefully adjusting the core's output, not enough to cause a meltdown, just enough to create instabilities in other systems. He set the changes to happen slowly over the next few days. The first sign came 12 hours later. The gravity in the medical bay fluctuated for 3 seconds. Several raiders fell to the floor as the gravity intensified briefly, then returned to normal. "What was that?" one of them demanded. "Checking," a technician replied, studying his equipment. "The fusion core shows minor fluctuations, probably just the old systems breaking down." But the fluctuations continued, always in different locations, never dangerous, just enough to keep everyone on edge. They couldn't predict where or when the next one would happen. Then escalated. He had found the station's industrial equipment stores, tools designed for mining and construction, plasma cutters that could slice through steel, mag clamps that could crush metal, welding torches that burned hot enough to melt armor. He began setting traps, real ones this time, not just psychological games. In a corridor near the fuel storage, he weakened a support beam and connected it to a motion sensor. When 3 walked past, the beam collapsed. They dove aside, but the falling debris blocked the entire corridor. 2 of them were trapped on the wrong side, separated from their team. Moved fast. He sealed the airlocks at both ends of the trapped section. The 2 found themselves in a dead-end corridor with no way out. "We're sealed in Section 7, one of them reported over the radio. "The human must be nearby." But was already gone, and before the others could cut through the airlocks, he had moved to another part of the station. Another trap was ready. This one involved the cargo bay where they stored their loot, had spent hours calculating weight distribution and structural stress points. He activated a series of small explosive charges, carefully placed to avoid casualties but maximize chaos. The explosions ripped through support cables. Cargo containers fell like dominoes. The in the bay ran for cover as thousands of pounds of metal crashed around them. When the dust settled, the entire cargo bay was a disaster. Their loot was buried under debris. No one died, but 3 more were trapped under containers, requiring rescue, and their precious quantum fuel storage was now inaccessible without hours of dangerous excavation work. Stood in the ruined cargo bay, her face tight with controlled rage. "He's not harassing us anymore. He's actively trying to trap us here." "Maybe we should leave," one of her soldiers suggested. "Regroup and come back with more forces." "Our ships are docked," said quietly. "The docking clamps are controlled by the station's computer, which the human has access to." The words hung in the air. They were trapped. One human had turned their invasion into a siege, and they were the ones being surrounded. That night 3 died. They were part of a team investigating the station's reactor room, trying to understand the fusion core fluctuations. The area was dangerous even under normal circumstances. High radiation, extreme heat, delicate equipment had made it more dangerous. He had sabotaged the radiation shielding in one section, not completely, just enough that it would fail when someone added extra weight to the floor plates. The 3 walked into the room, their equipment detecting nothing wrong. Then one stepped on the wrong plate. The shielding fell. Radiation flooded the room. They realized their danger immediately and ran for the exit, but had already sealed the door. They died within minutes, not because of anything did directly, but because he understood the station's dangers and knew how to make the environment itself lethal. When the other found the bodies, examined the room carefully, she saw the precision in how the trap had been set, the calculations required to make it work, the cold efficiency of it. "This wasn't revenge," she said slowly. "This was a lesson. He's showing us that he can kill us whenever he wants." Rax looked at the dead raiders. What kind of human does this? What kind of training produces someone this dangerous? Didn't answer. She was thinking about her own military training, about how warriors were taught to fight. They learned to use their strength, speed, and pack tactics. They learned to dominate through superior physical ability. But this human fought differently. He didn't try to match their strength. He used the environment as a weapon. He turned their advantages into weaknesses. He attacked their psychology as much as their bodies. She had never encountered an enemy like this. Over the next 2 days, the situation deteriorated. They couldn't move freely through the station anymore. Every corridor might have a trap. Every room might be compromised. They had to check everything carefully, which slowed them down and exhausted their resources. Food was running low. The water tasted worse each day. The air quality was borderline dangerous in some areas, and the constant stress was breaking down their cohesion as a unit. Arguments broke out. Accusations flew. Some wanted to abandon the station immediately. Others wanted to hunt the human down and end this, struggled to keep her forces united. Meanwhile, watched from the shadows, he was tired. His wounds ached. His supplies were nearly gone, but he couldn't stop now. Every day they stayed was another day he had to survive. He studied carefully through the cameras. She was the real threat. Rax led through intimidation but led through competence. She was smart, disciplined, and dangerous. If anyone could figure out his patterns and catch him, it would be her. One evening, made a mistake. He was moving through a corridor he thought was empty, focused on reaching the water purification system. He didn't see the new motion sensor had placed in an unexpected location. The alarm blared. Within seconds, 6 were converging on his position. Ran, heading for the nearest maintenance tunnel, but had predicted this. She had positioned her troops to cut off his usual escape routes. He found himself in a dead-end corridor. Behind him, heavy footsteps approached. Ahead, the corridor ended in a sealed bulkhead. To his left and right, smooth walls with no openings. Stepped into view, her entire pack behind her. All their weapons were pointed at him. For the first time since this started, was truly cornered. "Surrender," commanded. "You've proven yourself. There's no shame in stopping now." Looked at the weapons, at the warriors, at confident expression. She thought she had won, thought she had finally caught the dangerous human. He smiled. Blood from a cut on his lip stained his teeth. "You think you've cornered me?" His hand moved to his belt, tensed, ready to give the order to fire, but just held up a small remote device. "I've cornered you." He pressed the button. Behind a series of controlled explosions sealed all the corridor exits. The walls shook. Debris fell from the ceiling. Emergency lights activated, bathing everything in red. When the dust cleared, both ends were trapped in the same corridor section, but realized something terrible. The lighting was red because the oxygen levels were dropping. This section was losing atmosphere. Stood calmly, a breathing mask already over his face. He had known this confrontation was coming, had prepared for it. The mask would give him 20 minutes of air. They had maybe 5 minutes before they passed out. In the chaos, as they tried to find a way out, disappeared into a hidden panel in the wall, too small for them to follow. By the time they broke through the sealed exit and reached breathable air again, he was gone. 2 more were unconscious from oxygen deprivation. They would survive, but they would remember that moment of helplessness forever. Stood in the corridor, breathing hard, staring at the hidden panel had used. This human had predicted her tactics, had planned for the confrontation, had turned her moment of victory into another demonstration of his control over the station. "What are we hunting?" one of her soldiers asked quietly. Didn't answer. She was starting to suspect that they weren't the hunters anymore. They were the prey. Station Helios 9 was dying. The life support systems ran at minimal capacity. Whole sections had no power. The air was thin and cold. Water was rationed. The once bustling station had become a tomb lit by emergency lights and filled with shadows. 15 remained operational. 7 more were injured or dead. Their supplies were nearly exhausted. Their morale was shattered, and they were still trapped because the docking clamps refused to release their ships. Rax wanted to leave. He had argued with for hours, saying they should cut their losses and abandon the station. But she refused. "If we run from one human," said, "we lose more than this battle. We lose our honor. Every clan will know we were beaten by a single prey animal." "Better that than dying here," Rax countered. They stood in what remained of their command center. Around them, exhausted raiders tried to rest. Some cleaned weapons that were running low on power. Others stared at nothing, their eyes hollow with fatigue and fear. Listened to their argument through the communication system. He sat in his hidden room, surrounded by empty ration packages and medical supplies. His body was covered in new injuries, a deep cut on his arm, bruised ribs from a fall 2 days ago, burns on his hands from working with damaged electrical systems. But he was still alive, still fighting, and he had just learned something important from their conversation. They cared about honor, about reputation, about how this battle would be remembered by their people. He could use that. Activated the station-wide communication system. His voice echoed through every speaker, reaching every on the station. "Commander, this is Earth Coalition Intelligence. I have a proposal." The froze. This was the first time the human had spoken directly to them, grabbed a communicator. "I'm listening, human." "You want to leave with your honor intact," said. "I want you to leave. We both want the same thing, so let's end this properly." "What are you suggesting?" "Single combat, you and me, hand to hand, in the central hub where everyone can watch. If you win, I release your ships and you leave. If I win, you surrender and face human justice." Silence filled the station. They looked at each other with surprise. This human was challenging their commander to a duel. The audacity of it was shocking. Rax spoke quietly to his sister. "It's a trap, it has to be." "Maybe," said, "but what choice do we have? We can't stay here much longer, our supplies will run out and we still haven't caught him." She activated her communicator. "I accept, human, but I have conditions. No weapons, no equipment, just our bodies and our skills." "Agreed," replied. 1 hour central hub, come alone." Turned to her troops. "If I don't come back, Rax takes command. Follow his orders." "Sister, this is foolish," Rax said. "No, this is the only way we leave here with any dignity." She began removing her armor and weapons. "Besides, I'm twice his size and 3 times his strength. In a fair fight, I'll crush him." But as she prepared, doubt crept into her mind. This human didn't fight fair. Every encounter had been carefully planned, using environment and psychology. Would he really agree to a straightforward battle? In his room, prepared differently. He stretched his muscles, working through the pain. He checked his injuries, making sure nothing was bleeding badly enough to slow him down. He thought through everything he knew about physiology. They were stronger, faster. Their scales provided natural armor. Their claws could tear through metal. In a direct fight, a human had no chance against a warrior. But hadn't survived 3 months by fighting fair. He made his way to the central hub through the maintenance tunnels. The hub was a large open space at the station's core. It was designed for gatherings and ceremonies when the station was active. Now it was empty except for debris and broken furniture. Emerged from an access panel and waited. He wore only his basic clothing. No armor, no visible weapons. His hands were empty. Arrived exactly on time, entering through the main corridor. She had come alone as promised. Behind her, through the open door, could see other watching from a safe distance. She was magnificent in a terrifying way. 8 feet tall, her muscles coiled with power. Her dark green scales gleamed under the emergency lights. Her claws extended, each one sharp enough to pierce steel. "You look small, human," said, studying him. "I expected the warrior who has been hunting us to be more impressive." "Size doesn't matter in a hunt," replied. only skill. They circled each other. The hub was about 40 feet across, giving them room to move. Eyes scanned the environment: broken tables, a fallen support beam, loose floor panels, every detail mattered. Attacked first. She was fast, incredibly fast. Her clawed hand swept towards chest with enough force to tear him open. He rolled aside, barely avoiding the strike. Her claws sparked against the floor where he had been standing. She pressed the attack, using her reach advantage. Long, sweeping strikes that kept moving and defending. He couldn't get close without risking those deadly claws. But he wasn't trying to get close, not yet. Led her around the hub, moving in a pattern that looked random but wasn't. He was positioning her, drawing her toward specific locations, making her think she was dominating the fight. His confidence grew. The human was fast for his size, but he couldn't keep dodging forever. She would tire him out, then finish this. She lunged forward with both hands, trying to corner him against a wall. Dropped low and rolled under her attack. As he moved, his hand grabbed something from the floor, a piece of broken pipe about 2 feet long. He came up swinging. The pipe cracked against his knee. She grunted in pain but didn't fall. Her leg was armored with scales, but the impact had hurt. She turned on him, angry now. "Weapons?" she hissed. "You said no weapons." "I said I'd bring no weapons," corrected, breathing hard. "I never said I wouldn't use what I found here." Roared and charged, threw the pipe at her face, making her flinch for just a second. In that second, he ran toward a fallen support beam and leaped onto it. The beam shifted under his weight, the end rising like a seesaw. Followed him up the beam, her greater weight making it tilt further. At the highest point, jumped backward. The beam, now unbalanced, swung down hard, lost her footing and fell to the floor. Before she could rise, was on her. He had grabbed a length of cable and wrapped it around her neck from behind. Not to choke her, her neck was too thick and armored for that, but to control her head position. Grabbed the cable and pulled. Her strength was overwhelming, felt himself being lifted off his feet. She slammed backward, crushing him against a wall. The impact drove the air from his lungs. But he didn't let go. He wrapped his legs around her torso, using his whole body to hold on. With one hand maintaining the cable, his other hand reached for her face, specifically her eyes. Had excellent eyesight, but eyes were still vulnerable, even on a warrior like. Fingers jabbed toward them, jerked her head aside, the cable around her neck forcing her movements to be awkward. She reached back, trying to grab him. Her claws caught his arm, cutting deep. Blood ran down his hand, but used the pain to focus. He shifted his weight suddenly, throwing her off balance. They crashed to the floor together. The cable came loose, rolled free and stood, breathing heavily. Stood opposite her, his arm bleeding, his body bruised from her attacks. "You're good," admitted, "for a human, but this ends now." She pulled a small device from her belt, tensed, ready for some hidden weapon, but the device just emitted a high-frequency sound, painful to human ears, debilitating actually. Dropped to one knee, his hands going to his ears. The sound was like needles in his brain. He couldn't think, couldn't move properly. "I said no weapons I brought," said, walking toward him slowly. "But like you said, using what's available isn't against the rules. This frequency disruptor is standard equipment, not a weapon, just a tool." She was right, had been outsmarted at his own game. She stood over him, raising her clawed hand for the final strike. "You fought well, human, but biology determines the victor. Your species will always lose to mine in direct combat." Looked up at her through the pain. His hand fumbled at his belt, fingers trembling. He found what he was looking for, a small device of his own. "You're right," he gasped. "Biology does matter." He triggered the device. Another sound erupted, this one even higher frequency. Too high for human ears, but not for. Their superior hearing, their advantage in detecting threats became a weakness. Screamed, All the watching from the doorway collapsed, clutching their heads. The sound was agony to their sensitive hearing. His grip loosened for just 1 second. 1 second was all needed. He surged up from the floor, ignoring his injuries. His training kicked in, techniques designed specifically for fighting larger opponents. He struck her knee again, the same one he had hit with the pipe, this time with his full weight behind it. The knee buckled, fell to one knee, moved behind her, his arm wrapping around her neck in a proper chokehold this time, not cutting off air, cutting off blood flow to the brain. Tried to throw him off. Her hands grabbed at him, claws cutting his skin, but he held on with everything he had. His arm tightened. His technique was perfect. This was what the Ghost Protocol had taught him, how to take down opponents who were stronger, faster, better armed. You didn't need to be stronger. You needed to be smarter, more adaptable, more willing to do whatever it took to win. Struggles weakened. The blood choke was working, her vision blurred. The world went gray, then dark. She collapsed. Held the choke for 3 more seconds to be sure, then released it. He fell beside her, gasping for breath. His entire body screamed with pain. Blood covered his arms and chest from a dozen cuts, but he was alive and was unconscious at his feet. The others stared from the doorway, shocked into silence. Their commander, their strongest warrior, defeated by a human half her size, the human who should have been easy prey. Stood slowly. He swayed on his feet but remained standing. He looked at the watching. She fought with honor, he said, his voice hoarse. I offer the same terms: surrender, face justice, no more deaths today. Rax stepped forward from the crowd. He looked at his unconscious sister, at the bloodied human still standing. Something like respect showed in his eyes. We surrender, he said quietly. One by one, the raiders laid down their weapons. The battle for Station Helios 9 was over, and against all logic, against all their assumptions about humanity, a single human had won. The medical bay on Station Helios 9 had never been so busy. Sat on an examination table while a medic, supervised by Rax, carefully treated his wounds. The cuts on his arms required 17 stitches. His ribs were badly bruised but not broken. Burns on his hands were treated with regenerative gel. You should be dead, the medic said, not unkindly. These injuries, the blood loss, fighting on an empty stomach for days, your body should have given up. Humans are stubborn, replied quietly. We don't give up easily. Across the room, Commander was also being treated. She had woken an hour after the fight, her pride wounded more than her body. She sat in silence, occasionally glancing at the human who had defeated her. Had reactivated the life support systems throughout the station. Clean air flowed again. The temperature stabilized. Water ran clear from the taps. He had also unlocked the docking clamps on the ships, though he made it clear they would not be leaving until Earth Coalition forces arrived. Rax stood near the doorway, watching with a complicated expression. Finally, he spoke. Why didn't you kill us? You had many chances. You could have caused a reactor meltdown or vented entire sections into space. Why keep us alive? Finished wrapping a bandage around his hand before answering. Killing you would have been easy. Making you surrender was harder, more valuable. I don't understand. Your people think humans are weak, explained. You raid our colonies because we seem like easy targets, but if I had just killed you all, nothing would change. Your clans would think we got lucky, or use some kind of trick. They would keep raiding us. He stood up, wincing at the pain. But now you go home with a different story. You tell them about the human who hunted you on the station, who turned your strength against you, who beat your best warrior in single combat. You tell them that humans aren't prey. Spoke for the first time since waking. You were proving a point, this whole time. Every trap, every attack, every humiliation. It wasn't about survival. It was about changing our perception of your species. Partly, admitted. It was also about revenge. You killed my team, Good people who trusted me to keep them safe. I wanted you to pay for that. But you chose a path that served multiple purposes, said, understanding dawning. Revenge, survival, and a message to our people, efficient, like everything else you did here. Rax shook his head in amazement. What kind of training produces someone like you? What kind of humans make war this way? We call it asymmetric warfare, said. Humans evolved as hunters, not the fastest or strongest, but we learned to outlast our prey, to use tools to adapt to any environment. When we went to the stars, we brought those skills with us. He walked to the window, looking out at the stars. My unit, the Ghost Protocol, we train to fight when everything is against us, when we're outnumbered and cut off from support. We learn to use the environment, psychology, and persistence to win impossible battles. Your team that died, said softly. They were Ghost Protocol too. No, they were regular intelligence officers. I was their handler. His voice was tight. They were on a mission to identify raiding patterns. Someone betrayed our position. Your raiders knew exactly where to find us. Rax and exchanged glances. We were told the location by a contact, someone who wanted humans out of this sector. Who turned to face them, his eyes hard. We don't know the name, Rax said. All our dealings went through encrypted channels, but the contact was human. That much we know for certain. A human traitor had suspected as much. The ambush had been too perfect, too well-timed. Someone with access to coalition intelligence had sold out his team. That person was still out there, still working against humanity. When coalition forces arrive, said, you'll tell them everything about this contact, every detail you remember. In exchange, I'll recommend reduced sentences for your surrender. You would speak for us? Asked, surprised. You surrendered honorably. You fought by the rules of the challenge, and you're providing valuable intelligence. Shrugged. Besides, I need you alive to tell your people what happened here. Over the next 2 days, an uneasy peace settled over the station. The helped repair some of the damage they had caused, shared his remaining food supplies with them. They were still enemies, technically, but the mutual respect that had grown between them changed the dynamic. Approached one evening, as he worked on restoring a damaged section of the station computer system. May I speak with you? She asked. You're not a prisoner, said. You can speak whenever you want. She sat down across from him, her large frame making the human-sized chair look like a toy. I've been thinking about our fight, about everything that happened here. In our culture, we value strength above all else. The strongest lead, the weak follow or die. I know, I studied your culture before my mission. Yes, you studied us. You understood us better than we understood you. Was quiet for a moment. That's what I realized. True strength isn't just physical power. It's the ability to adapt, to learn, to survive impossible situations. You demonstrated strength in ways we never considered. Is this leading somewhere? Asked not unkindly. Reached into her armor and pulled out a long blade. It was beautiful, made from some dark metal that seemed to absorb light. The handle was wrapped in what looked like leather, with symbols carved into it. This is a honor blade, she said, holding it out to him. We give it only to warriors who have bested us in combat. You earned this of Earth. You are the first human to ever receive one. Took the blade carefully. It was heavier than it looked, perfectly balanced. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. I can't accept this, he said. We're still enemies. No, corrected. We're rivals. There's a difference. An enemy is someone you want destroyed. A rival is someone who makes you stronger by challenging you. She stood. You taught me that humans are worthy rivals. That means something in our culture. She moved toward the door, then paused. You said you hunt something else now. The one who betrayed your team. When you find them, if you need help, call on me. You've earned a. After she left, sat alone, holding the honor blade. He had set out to prove that humans weren't weak prey. He had succeeded. But he had also done something unexpected. He had earned the respect of people who defined themselves by their superiority over others. The Earth Coalition fleet arrived 3 days later. 5 ships, led by a heavy cruiser, met with the commanding officer, Captain Lee, and gave his full report. Lee listened in stunned silence as described the 3 months alone, the psychological warfare, and the final confrontation. "You captured 27 raiders by yourself," Lee said, as if testing whether the words made sense spoken aloud. "Do you understand how impossible that sounds?" "I had advantages," said. "I knew the station, I had time to prepare, and they underestimated me. Still, this changes everything. High Command will want to study your tactics. They'll want to replicate what you did here." "That's a mistake," said firmly. "What I did worked because of specific circumstances. They won't make the same errors again, and other species will have different weaknesses and strengths." "Then what do you recommend?" "Teach adaptability, not tactics. Every situation is different. Every enemy is different. We need soldiers who can think, who can learn, who can turn any environment to their advantage. That's the real lesson from this station." Lee nodded slowly. "You'll help with the training programs?" "No," said. "I have something else to do first." He showed Lee the evidence of the human traitor, the encrypted messages, the timing of the ambush. Lee's face darkened as he read through the reports. "We'll open an investigation immediately." "I want to lead it," said. "My team, my right to find who killed them." Lee started to object, then saw the look in his eyes. This wasn't negotiable. "All right, you have 6 months, find them." "I will." They were transferred to Coalition custody. True to his word, spoke on behalf of Enrax, explaining their honorable surrender and cooperation. The charges were reduced from execution to imprisonment and eventual repatriation to space. Before was taken away, she approached one last time. "We will tell our people what happened here," she said. "The clans will declare humans a predator species. No more raids on your colonies." Just like that, because of one fight. "You don't understand how our culture works. By defeating me in single combat, you prove that humans can fight as equals. To raid a predator species is dishonorable. We won't make that mistake again." "What about the ones who don't care about honor?" Smiled, showing her teeth. "Then they'll learn the hard way what happens when they underestimate humans. You taught them well." As her ship departed, stood in the observation deck of the Coalition cruiser. Station Helios 9 floated in the distance, a dead thing soon to be salvaged and forgotten. But what had happened there would echo through human and space for years to come. Captain Lee found him there, ready to go home. "Not yet," said. He pulled up a data file on a nearby screen. Names, faces, Coalition officers who had access to his team's mission details. "I have one more hunt." He touched the honor blade at his side. The weight of it was a reminder. He had proven that humans could fight as predators. Now he would prove it again, hunting the one who had betrayed his own species. The stars streamed past as the ship entered FTL Drive. In the reflection of the window, his eyes showed no fear, no hesitation, just the cold, patient determination of someone who had learned what he was capable of. He had survived the impossible. He had beaten enemies who should have destroyed him. He had turned weakness into strength and fear into power. The lone human wasn't weak anymore. He had become something the galaxy had forgotten humans could be. An apex predator with the patience to wait, the intelligence to plan, and the will to never, ever give up. And now, someone was about to learn that being hunted by was a fate far worse than death, because he wouldn't just kill his prey. He would make them understand exactly what they had done, and why they would pay for it. The hunt was beginning again, and this time his prey would never see him coming. The end.